Today on episode 127 of Rail Talk, we look forward to stacked cards for the Florida Derby and Arkansas Derby, look back at a tremendous performance by me and also emerging market in the Louisiana Derby, and break down the HISA versus Churchill Downs beef. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. I want to give a shout out to one of our excellent breakaway Rail Talk guests, Joe Moore. Provided us these stylish, fresh beanies that we're wearing right now. He owns Silo Skyline Farms, and he started the Wisconsin Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, which you can check out at wistoba.org. Very catchy, and we appreciate people that are trying to expand racing into new states. We need more of a footprint with tracks closing down, and so a hat tip, a very stylish beanie tip to our man, Joe Moore, for the merch and for taking on that project.
Very well done, Joe. Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. And Joe, just a year ago this weekend, you and I were hoisting a very heavy trophy at the Arkansas Derby. And
fighting over it, really.
One of us is heading back to Hot Springs for yet another $1 million race. And the other one is going to be pooper scooping the backyard while these preps are going on. Let's guess to see who is which.
Good thing you got a nice beanie to be in the backyard scooping that poop while I'm hopefully hoisting another trophy. But yeah, so I'll be back down in Hot Springs this weekend. And John, don't you worry, bud. I'm sure there's plenty of big racing days ahead for you this year. The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and John Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by Tailor Made. When you're with them, your family, whether it comes to the sales, the stallion barn, boarding, partnerships on the racetrack, they really treat you like you are the most important client all the time. That's why they've been doing this, why they've stuck around for so long. So many dedicated people dedicated to the horse and the client for decades in this business. And you're buying into that expertise and that experience. And that is second to none when it comes to Tailor Made. And John, you guys work with them, getting yearlings prepped for the sales, and talk a little bit about like how in depth they are when it comes to the valuation.
Well, Joe, it's one thing if you have a consignor that says, okay, I'll put together the paperwork, I'll do the Coggins, I'll get everything all situated, get the horse, get the catalog assignment, all those things, and that's important work. But Tailor Made does something a little bit extra, and that is this time of year we actually take X-rays of all of these sales candidates. So we know exactly what's going on. If there's something preventative we can do to help that horse down the road, we'll do it now. And if not, then at least we know kind of what the scorecard is when we're putting horses into various sales. We know what their vet work looks like as of this moment. So trying to be proactive, trying to make sure that if there are things you can do to help a horse, that you do those procedures or you do, that regiment now in order to make sure that the horse is 100% for the end user, whether it's you or somebody at the sale. That is something that something that Tailor Made really stresses when Fasig's coming out, when Keeneland's coming out. To look at your yearlings. Joe, the other thing is we just retired a filly off the racetrack, Phoenix of Wit, who was a Loop de Vega filly that was with Joe Orsino, and sent it up to Tailor Made in Kentucky. And normally when you do a mating analysis, Joe, you're doing it based on, a couple of things, conformation, genetics, obviously, price point and a mixture thereof. And you try to come up with a couple of candidates to apply your mare for those respective seasons. Now that it's the end of March, a lot of those more popular stallions are spoken for. All the contracts have already been, have been accepted. And basically you're looking for other options. Tailor Made, in this case with this filly, said, hey, John, not only do we have to zone in on a couple of horses, but she's cycling, and I think we need to breed her Friday or Saturday. So they actually went out to the major stallion farms and said, if I need to breed my mare Friday into Saturday, who's going to be available? So it's kind of like, that's another active way, proactive way to make a decision is, if I think it's the greatest contract genetics, the greatest mating in the world, but I can't breed my mare when she's ovulating, well, then it doesn't matter. It's wasteful time. But now that you're in the throes of the middle of breeding season, some horses get backed up. Some horses, speed through their book and are ready to take on more mares. So you need to handicap that as well. And that's something that the guys and gals at Tailor Made are so good about, is not only which matings make the most sense for all the price points and all the confirmation points we talked about before, but who's going to be available to breed your mare when she's ovulating to try to enhance and get that pregnancy locked down.
Okay, so we are upon the second to last major Kentucky Derby prep weekend. It's happening real fast. I felt like it was just January and we were kind of feeling around, trying to figure out who the main contenders were for the Derby. I mean, as I've said over and over again, the contention goes deep, and look no further than the field for Saturday's Florida Derby to prove that out. I mean, this is, Chief Wallaby and Commandment are obviously the headliners, as they ran 1-2 in a tremendous Fountain of Youth, but you also have Nearly coming in off of those blowout wins, 3 straight blowout wins at Gulfstream. And you have the Puma, who's running back on just 3 weeks rest after the Tampa Bay Derby, which is an interesting decision because, I mean, the Bluegrass is right around the corner. If you want to run the Lexington, there's some points. It's an interesting spacing idea, but then if you do run well and you have enough points, you get 5 weeks until the Derby. But it's been a really good winter, I think, for the Florida 3-year-olds, and that was laid out completely in the Fountain of Youth with an excellent stretch battle between 2 really nice horses. And I said it at the time, like, Chief Wallaby, looking at the quotes from Bill Mott, did not seem like he was all that hot on running in that race. And man, did he show up. Mm-hmm. And I think if I had to pick one horse out of the entire crop right now that has the most upside long term, he's the one I would take. But I mean, you going into only the third race here, he could regress. Commandment's got a little bit more seasoning. He's run 4 races, 3 straight wins. But I don't know, John. Like I'm very, very impressed with the Florida 3-year-olds relative to the Arkansas 3-year-olds, and I do think it's very interesting that Nearly is going to get his biggest test yet, because he as impressive as he's been, he hasn't run against a whole lot. He did draw outside, which will be important in this race. But yeah, I think the top 4 in here are going to be like major contenders on Derby Day.
Joe, I agree with you, and we talk about some of the timing of some of the races. Do you run here? Do you wait? Do you want to run at Keeneland? Do you want to give yourselves enough time between whatever your last prep races and the Kentucky Derby, but not too much time? And the Tampa Bay races, the schedule doesn't really lend itself very well to actually run in the Kentucky Derby. And I know that personally because we did it years ago with Helium, where after winning the Tampa Bay Derby, we opted to give him all the time, the 9 weeks between races. And granted, he wasn't up to the task as far as the top 3 or 4 horses that ran in the Derby that year. But it probably wasn't to his benefit to give him that much time off. So you're kind of like, between a rock and a hard place as far as, do you bring your horse back 3 weeks after running in the Tampa Bay Derby to run in the Florida Derby, or do you give him the extra week and run in Kentucky or the Bluegrass, or do you just opt to skip all of them, keep the points and go right into the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby? But I think your assessment is spot on as far as the Curlin Florida Derby presented by Hillendale. This year, there's 3 or 4 top horses, and then a lot of horses that need to improve, greatly in order to be in the conversation for the Kentucky Derby. But how about the fact that Sam, for our contest, has Chief Wallaby, Commandment, and Andrew has Nearly as well. Did I do that in my best Kiwi accent? Was that
that was solid.
Okay, that was pretty good.
It wasn't quite Rocco's Modern Life, but it was close.
All right, well, I'll get there. But Andrew was nice enough, from Marion Bloodstock was nice enough to give us some of the pedigrees from the Aryan website, so you can see just how well bred some of these young 3-year-olds are as they're approaching their hopes to get into the gate for the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you bring that up, because we are going to get into the Mage Rage Derby contest standings. But just just to touch on the Arkansas Derby real quick. I mean, there's just no real standout. Like, I know Renegade is shipping in. He's the favorite right now. He ran well in the Sam Davis, but just figure wise, he hasn't stood out just yet. Obviously, he's out of a really nice mare, and Spice is nice. And, buy into Mistiff, you got to think he's going to improve. But it's not the kind of race that I'm like dying to take a short price. I think there's other ways you can go. Does sound like there's going to be a big scratch in the Arkansas Derby with Napoleon Solo coming out. Sounds like he's going to run in either the Wood or the Bluegrass the following weekend. And, I think that takes a little bit of speed out of the race, but you still got to, some at the rail with Redland Rebels, who ran really well, I think, when he was fourth at 38-1 in the Tampa Derby. And then you got Litmus Test from the outside. But I think that's a impactful scratch because of the speed that it takes out of the race. And to me, that makes Renegade a less likely winner because it's less likely he's going to have a pace meltdown to close into. Blackout Time, I think, is interesting. John has Blackout Time. I didn't run all that great in the Rebel, but I think was probably like a little bit too up on the pace. I think he'd rather just sit and make one run. Silent Tactic, he's been moving forward, got into a dogfight for the first time in the Rebel and just got nosed out. Class president is not back in here. He was 5 1/4 lengths clear of third. So he's going to take a lot of money, well deserved. But again, he's the kind of horse that's probably going to need a little bit of a setup. And let's take a look at those Mage Rage Derby contest standings because obviously presented by our homies at Airdrie Stud and Mage. I was reading, because there's a couple of horses, and we're going to talk about emerging market in a little bit, talk about Chief Wallaby, some of these horses that, are going to have their third start, going to the Derby either 2 or 3 starts, and only 4 horses have won the Kentucky Derby with 3 starts on their resume, but 3 out of the 4 were in the last 20 years, and one of them was Mage a couple of years ago. Lightly raced horse, started in January or February, and a lot of people questioned whether or not he'd have enough seasoning to get to the Derby. Not only to get to the Derby, but he won the Derby, and I think that shows a lot of precocity, but like a real hardiness too. To start that late in your career and still be a Derby winner shows that talent, but also shows that willingness to run and that fortitude. So as I said before, 15,000 on the Airdrie Stud roster, that's a bargain and a half. And I think that those books are going to fill up. And I think this is the ground floor before his yearlings hit the sales ring this summer, and then before his 2-year-olds obviously hit the track next spring and summer. So Airdrie Stud, go to the website to learn more about Mage. But I mean, you hear me talk about that family all the time. You should already know all that you need to know to get in on that book. So these are the Mage Rage Derby contest standings, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but I made a move. And I said last week, I put all my eggs in the emerging market basket because my team sucks, and I'm really looking forward to that supplemental draft next week to get me back in the mix. But he did gut out the Louisiana Derby win, which gave me 100 points, and yet I'm not out of fourth because Andrew had Golden Tempo run third in that race, a clunk up, no impact third. He gets 25 points anyway. So he's at 186. We'll throw up the standings now. Sam is still far ahead. And as John mentioned, she's got a lot of action this weekend. She's got Commandment and Chief Wallaby in the Florida Derby. And then she's got Litmus Test as well in the Arkansas Derby. So she's still first at 239. John is in second at 195. Napoleon Solo, as I mentioned, is going to scratch and run the following weekend. He's got Blackout Time, who I like. And then Andrew just nosed above me for third place. He's got Nearly and Silent Tactic. And then I've got 183. Andrew has 186. And then Lauren now is at the back of the pack.
Is she still in the contest?
Yeah, I don't want to be the one to break her the news that she's in last, but she does have Renegade this weekend, so she does have some action. And yeah, I'm just going to need like 8 horses to run off the board this week in order to keep my position in the contest. But John, there's a lot of action.
There's a lot of action, and certainly that's why we do this, just to keep these races even more interesting. I mean, look, there's millions of dollars that are changing hands. There's Derby points that are available, to be snatched up by the first finishers in all these races. But it really comes down to the Mage Rage contest. And if you talk to the breeders and you talk to the people in Kentucky who are in the know, they look to our contest first, and then make decisions on their matings based on who we pick and what where those horses are from. So This is where the news breaks, and this is where we fix it.
Absolutely. So yeah, lots of movement expected in the contest this weekend. And then, like I said, we have one more major Derby prep weekend, but we have the draft, the supplemental draft before that, assuming we can corral all 5 people into a room at the same time in the next week or so. But yeah, we're all going to be dumping 2 horses, and I'm picking up 2 more horses, which I'm hanging on to for dear life. But John, you can attest. I texted the group chat right away when Emerging Market gutted that win out that I'm making a move.
Oh, yeah, the race wasn't even official yet. And Joe was like, look who's climbing out of last place. And I was like, the Brooklyn Nets? No.
Patty was like asleep. I woke her up just to text
sure.
that.
Well, it was 2 p.m, wasn't it? Or 6 p.m. Whenever that race went off. So Sam probably was asleep. But Lauren is in last place here. And the only reason why I'm busting her chops so much is that we're in a NCAA bracket tournament together. And I had Florida winning the NCAA tournament. She was very quick, very, very quick to be snarky and send me guess who's in first and guess who's not. And, this is obviously the contest that matters. Who gives a crap about the NCAA tournament brackets? It's the Mage Rage contest is all that matters. And next week's supplement, Joe, I wouldn't be so quick to be wishing that you're out of last place, because there's some prime candidates to be scoffed up that haven't been picked yet by any of our experts.
Rail Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. And there's nothing more unique or special than the horse racing industry. It's why we do this every week and why we're so passionate about it. Another guy who's really passionate about the racing business is Chris Moore, who leads Epic's equine specialty practice. You see him all over the place at the sales, at the races. He has horses himself. He buys, he owns, he breeds, he sells. He does a little bit of everything. And he's the first thing you should go to him for is insurance expertise, because this can be a messy insurance situation because there are so many horses changing hands, especially this time of year. You got breedings going on, digital sales. There's a lot to focus on and to assess when it comes to your insurance needs. And a lot of equine mortality policies renew around yearling sales time. So a lot of you listening are already halfway through your policy. Great time to review your current plan. Give Chris a holler. Make sure it's working the way it's supposed to. Got the 2-year-old sales as well, so buying and selling could impact your policy. Give Chris a call. Shoot him a text at 317-650-4519. Great person, great at what he does, and we appreciate Chris and the Epic team. And I know you will too if you get involved and get the benefit of their expertise and all the business they've done over the years and all the ways they've made things easier for people in the racing industry. And that leads us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
Thank you, booming voiceover man. This week's Epic Performance of the Week, and we've talked about this horse before. I don't think he's been epic before. He's done 127 episodes, so we're not going all the way back to the archives to check it out. But if we haven't, or if we have, he deserves it anyway. Touch Upon a Star is this week's Epic Performance of the Week. Maybe the coolest horse in racing. He won the New Orleans Classic on Saturday at Fairgrounds, his second consecutive win in the New Orleans Classic. He did it at 6-1 last year. This year, the secret was out. He was even money or 6-5. He is now 21 for 28 in his career, and this pushed him up near over $2 million in earnings. Wow. He's a Louisiana bred superstar by Star Guitar, a $15,000 Texas yearling purchase by Jake Delhomme, former quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, been a great supporter of racing, especially Louisiana racing over the years, trained by Jeff Delhomme. And he's an awesome horse, super game. He got a challenge in the stretch of that race and turned back his competitors. I just love stuff like this. And John, we were talking about it a little bit before where, horses can humble you because they don't necessarily run the way they're supposed to. Sometimes they don't run at all because they don't feel like it. Touch Upon a Star is pretty much the opposite of that. He is an absolute machine. And I think 21 for 28 speaks for itself. But again, he's not just doing it against the Louisiana Bred Company. He's doing it against some of the best older horses in the country. He beat Sierra Leone handily last year in the New Orleans Classic. Man, but we should all be so lucky to have a horse like Touch Upon a Star at some point in our lives, John.
No question about it. I mean, he's the kind of horse that everyone dreams of because he dances every dance. He was modest purchase price, and he's just fun to go watch and see in the races. And Joe, he kind of reminds me of like from years gone by of a John Henry, where it was like a big deal to watch a horse like that run because every time he ran, no matter where he ran, he was up for the challenge. And it's just great to see these smaller operations, smaller programs, without the $1 billion budgets that a lot of the programs have, come in and go toe to toe with the top horses of his division.
Yeah, no doubt. And to wit, the horse he turned back, Corporate Power, $925,000 Keeneland September purchase. So it's like there's no guarantees in this game. That's what keeps us coming back and touch upon a star. He's 7 years old now. Hope he keeps running as long as he's sound and happy and willing to do it. And just it's great. Like I love like the when we have a mainstream sports connection like that with Jake Delhomme, I think that's great for the industry. Brings some like mainstream eyes to a horse in Louisiana that really is a star in every sense of the word and is this week's epic performance of the week. Rail Talk is sponsored by The Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len and DJ Stable have over 200 horses. They won over 2,600 races, and The Green Group has close to 1,000 clients in the horse business. 1,000 because they make them money and save them taxes. It is crunch time. Probably going to need to file an extension, but start that conversation with Len and The Green Group now. Either way, they will get your tax, I'm not going to say mess because I don't know you, but it's possible it's a mess if you're in the horse business and there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of new loopholes and benefits and stuff that you can take advantage of that you might not necessarily be privy to. That's where Len and The Green Group come in, and we appreciate them as always. And if you want to give them a holler, do so at what's that number, Michael Agresta?
732-634-5100. Sorry, I was prematurely boogieing, Joe, before you got
What?
that.
Okay. Well, I was like, we got to keep up the thought that the music is actually playing while we're dancing, John. You broke the fourth wall. Thank you very much. But shout out to Michael. Shout out to Len and The Green Group. You can also go to greenco.com. You don't have to dance along with us to the music, although you should, and you should be more in sync than John, apparently. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from yet another satisfied customer and current leader in the Mage Rage Derby contest standings. Our friend and yours, Samantha Perry, will tell you all about how Len and The Green Group have helped her.
Len Green of The Green Group is one of the greatest guys that I know in this industry. He's so kind, he's funny, but don't tell him I said that because it'll get his ego too big. But I trust him so much with anything horse related and especially tax related.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Len and The Green Group. We love that kind of synergy with so many of the people we love in this business. And if you want The Green Group to help you out the same way they've helped out Sam, you give them a call at 732-634-5100. And I didn't mention this, which I usually do. You have a special complimentary half hour with Len if you're a listener of Rail Talk. And I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, you are a listener of Rail Talk. So you qualify. Yes, you, if you call Len at that number or go to greenco.com. Len guarantees he will find you value and savings. He's done it for so many people across the industry. You hear from a different one every single week. Give him a shout, give him a holler, do it soon, and learn of all the benefits of working with Len and The Green Group. So this news came out shortly before we record. I'm so used to it coming after we record. I instinctively said it came out after we recorded. But for once, it came out before we recorded. The 2025 EID, Equine Injury Database statistics were released this morning. We're recording this on Tuesday. And quoting from the TDN story here, according to the initial data analysis from the 17th year of reporting to the EID, the rate of fatal injury in 2025 was 1.07 per 1,000 starts, the lowest rate since the EID began in 2009. This is the sixth consecutive year that the rate of fatal injury has been below 1.5. The rate of fatal injury decreased 3.6% from 2024 and has decreased 47% since the first statistics were published from the EID in 2009. This is like, obviously any number higher than zero is something to be worked on. We'll put that caveat right out there. We can always do better. Our goal should be to have zero horses break down ever on the racetrack. But the progress that has been made is incredible. And this is where I think you got to give a little bit of a hat tip, at least, to the Jockey Club. And I know they're the punching bag right now, but this kind of reporting and this kind of transparency did not exist prior to 2009. And since it has existed, I think that there has been an industry-wide pressure put upon everybody to make sure that these numbers continue to go down, because this is essentially our social license to operate right here. The more horses that break down and that we lose on the racetrack, the less likely it is that the sport is going to be able to continue into the future. Now, I want to give a shout out to everybody that has made all this progress possible the last 17 or 16, 17 years. I do think that you got to give a lot of credit to HISA as well for uniform safety standards and drug standards, something that we did not have prior to 2022. And a lot of credit goes to track operators and the people that are working on the surfaces every single day. Think of Glenn Kozak at NYRA, and California especially has been night and day from where it was 5-6 years ago in terms of the safety of the racetrack. You know, John, in an industry and a business where there are so many negative headlines, I really think that people should gravitate and grab on to this one, because, like I said, there's more work to be done. But this equates to like hundreds more horses every single year returning to their barns safely. And that's something that I think people should be proud of.
And Joe, the pendulum has swung. It is definitely an industry-wide issue and concern and top of mind now of the powers that be. You mentioned a couple of them already. I want to also add some credit to the sales companies as well, OBS and Fasig, particularly when it comes to their 2-year-old sales. Fasig basically, again, sponsor the show, but Fasig specifically is having an untimed sale coming up, untimed workouts, for their May sale, right after the Preakness. And OBS just had one of the safest sales ever in their history, with regard to horses competing in the Breeze show as well. And I think that's a direct result not only to the racetrack management, like you mentioned, but also a few of the things, including changes in the crop rule and changes in the medication rule. And I think that now it's quote unquote vogue to have safety as your primary pillar that you're building upon, as opposed to years ago where it was just, I need this horse to go as fast as it can, and if it survives, then that's great. But I want it to go 9 and 4, so that way I can sell it and move it on down the line. And I think the mindset, not for the entire industry, but the mindset overall has been safety first. And sometimes it takes rock bottom before you start to actually implement some of these rules and considerations that have been put forth into the horse industry. And Joe, I will never forget you and I talking after that Saratoga day when on one of the biggest race cards of the year, we had a number of fatalities that weekend, and it shook people to the point where a lot of headliners in the industry said no more. A couple of them said, I'm leaving the business because I just can't watch this anymore. And we're public about it, and rightfully so. And I think that some of those events colored people's thoughts as far as we need to focus more on safety, and getting the athlete, from the barn to compete and then back to the barn as safely as possible. And again, that wasn't always the mindset. So, credit, I think, needs to be spread around to a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals that made this their calling card. Safety, safety, safety.
No doubt. And I think anybody that's been been loud about this in the media also deserves a lot of credit. I'm not talking about us in particular. I'm talking about anybody that's made a big deal about this over the years. I think keeping that pressure on is absolutely enormous, and people need to continue doing it. And we're still waiting for the splits in terms of like turf, dirt, and synthetic. That data will come out a little bit later on. And I just I'm proud of the overarching North Star that we have now is get the horses safely to the races and back to the barn. And as you mentioned, John, it wasn't always like that. For a long time, it was not like that. And thankfully, everybody has now realized that. And as I said, there's more work to be done, but this is major progress. And, I just appreciate everybody that continues to push this ball forward.
Yeah. And Joe, and also just throw in there, like, not that I want to invite this group to come back in, but when was the last time you heard PETA say anything about our industry? When was the last time you saw them come and stand in front of a racetrack or stand in front of a sales company and protest? And there's a reason why. We talked about losing our social license. I think we've successfully regained our social license, but now we have to hold on to it with both hands because so much work went into it, and you don't get a second chance to do it again.
Yeah, as I said, and it's like it's honestly exciting. I think that there is so much more progress to be made. Like as far as we've come, like the fact that there's still so much more meat on the bone and so many more ways to keep horses safe. You'll think of like wearable biometrics and stuff that can stop catastrophic breakdowns before they develop, I think is enormous, and we can continue to keep driving this number down. And for an industry that a lot of times like I don't feel great about, this is one of those scenarios where I do feel like everyone has pushed in the right direction and has made the horses who do not have a say in this business, making sure they come back to their barn safely. And now 99.9% of them pretty much do. And we can say that and keep trying to move forward. One thing that I think is not helping the industry move forward is the constant back and forth in the courts about HISA. Now, we saw a judge basically agree with HISA that it's not unconstitutional. Yet another one in the Iowa HBPA suit that happened yesterday. And, I think there's other cases still pending, and the Supreme Court may or may not rule in June. So we're kind of still up in the air on that. But in the meantime, the biggest entity in all of racing, revenue-wise, doesn't want to pay its fees to HISA. Now, Churchill Downs and HISA are in court right now. They squared off last week about over $2 million in fees for 2025 that Churchill Downs has not paid yet. And HISA's kind of put the hammer down. They're basically like, they had a March 16th order that they required Churchill to pay over $5 million within 10 days or face the suspension of racing at Churchill Downs, Turfway, Ellis, and Presque Isle. I don't know that that's possible, but they certainly can restrict the simulcasting signal, which is a huge deal leading into the Derby. And, I saw some of the quotes from the Churchill attorneys that were like, oh, they've chased us to the ends of the earth for this money. I don't think that that's a great defense. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think they had to hound us for this money is a great, like, oh, please have sympathy on us, judge response and argument. Hello, this is Joe and John from the future, where gas is $8 a gallon. Timothy Chalamet still hasn't won an Oscar. And HISA and Churchill Downs have come to an agreement on the fees that Churchill owed them. We recorded an entire segment, so you didn't hear wrong in the open. We were going to talk about it. We had this whole thing about how we're going to have to pass the collection plate around for a company with a $6 billion valuation. But victimized yet again, John, by the Tuesday afternoon news dump. But overall, this is good news for the industry, don't you think?
Yeah, and again, we talked about how it just didn't make any sense for a $6 billion company like Churchill Downs Incorporated to eschew paying and delay paying, their pro rata portion of the HISA fees. And Joe, you know what? I don't know if it was through just putting it out there and the universe came together, or that people are actually starting to listen to what we have to say. Both can be true at the same time, but needless to say, it looks like that on undisclosed terms, HISA and Churchill Downs have come to an understanding. Churchill Downs is going to fork over the dough, and that everyone will continue to hold hands and sing Kumbaya in the horse industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good news that cooler heads have prevailed, and the Kentucky Derby will be broadcast outside of Kentucky. Seemed like a major thing for the industry to have happen in May. It's going to happen. Appreciate everybody sitting down, and enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah.
And Joe, since we're from the future, here's the pick six numbers. Oh, hope you saw that.
Wow. All right. Thanks, John from the future. John, I know you had some other news on the Lasix front, because this is something that the HISA board of directors is going to consider and vote on in May. A little bit of an update on that. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we talked last week about the Lasix rule and the fact that it's up for consideration again before the end of May. I think May 23rd is technically when the vote has to be in by. It'll be done prior to that. But right now, there's a board of directors. The HISA board of directors are sitting on a lot of information, studies, as we mentioned, discussions that they've had internally and externally with experts in the industry, and a group of us within the HISA Horsemen's Advisory Group, otherwise known as the HISA HAG. For we have to come up with a better, obviously marketing should have come up.
Definitely derogatory. Those HISA hags are at it again.
They're at it again, exactly. Anyway, we talked about it internally and decided to send a letter to the members of the HISA board of directors that we're going to be making a decision in this huge watershed discussion. And basically, 20 or so of us signed a letter that boils down to this, Joe. There's 6 paragraphs. I'll read the most important paragraph. We have given this very careful consideration, meaning the Lasix day rules. Out of deep concern for the health of our horses, doing all that we can to continue to support the industry and all the people it employs, both directly and indirectly, and thus for the good of racing in general. Here's the important part. The members of the HISA Horsemen's Advisory Group unanimously recommend that the HISA Board of Directors votes to continue the use of race day Lasix along the exact guidelines that currently exist. So basically what a group of veterinarians, owners, trainers, and experts in the field within the Horsemen's Advisory Group got together and sent this letter to the Board of Directors saying, please, for the safety of the horse and for the good of the industry, keep the Lasix rules exactly the way they are, because it is working. And it is working not having Lasix for 2-year-olds. It is working not having races for not having Lasix for black type races, and having Lasix everywhere else in between is for the greater good of the industry. Undersigned by 20 or so of us that are that make up the HISA advisory group.
Signed by 20 hags. No, I mean, I love that. And I think like this is like the space where you need to throw your weight around a little bit. Like, you're on these boards for a reason. And I think a lot of times these boards are just kind of like, it's a little bit of a merry-go-round, like just talking about the same stuff. But this is an area where you guys can really have an impact. And I think that's important for y'all to, encourage the board of directors to move in that direction, because I do think this is, there's so many things that need to be changed about the business. I do think this is one where we've found a good middle ground, found a good compromise. Let's not shake things up just to shake things up. So I hope they listen. It does seem like there's beyond just that, there's a concerted push in the industry from horsemen to, make sure that we stay on the current path. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on that. And yeah, just want to give a hat tip to everybody. This is like, I'm always impressed by the people in this business who do this in their free time. And listen, like we have a lot of privilege being in this business and being at the upper echelons of it, but it also is like a time requirement if you want to make sure the industry moves forward and moves in the right direction. And I just, I appreciate everybody that does anything outside of their day job to make sure that our industry is in a safer, more sustainable place. So I think we're lucky in that way that we have a lot of people, even if there's too many warring factions and, the industry is on shaky ground sometimes. I think we're lucky that, I've said this before, but we have a lot of really smart, really dedicated people who are so passionate about this business. That's one thing I love about racing is, like, I think because it's such a niche sport, we feel like a fierce need to defend it and sustain it. And I think there's so many people that, could be doing other things that are devoting their time to making sure that racing has a good future. And I'm always cognizant and appreciative of that. Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. Shout out to Fasig-Tipton. We got the digital sales going on every single month. We got the May Mid-Atlantic 2-year-old sale, which we're very excited about. The Gallop only sale. Hat tip and salute to Fasig for taking that on and really setting an example for the industry, I think, going forward. And it may not be on the top of your mind, but yearling sale season is coming up in 5-6 months, which means you got to start making decisions now about where you're going to send your horses. Johnny Green, tell us more.
This is prime season, Joe, for your yearling selection, yearling placement, I should say. And if you haven't called Fasig yet to identify which yearlings you want to have them consider for the July sale or the all-encompassing, all-select yearling sale at Saratoga in August, you need to get on the phone, get on your computer, send smoke signals, however you want to get that information to Boyd and Anna at Fasig-Tipton. You want to make sure that they are fully aware of which yearlings you want to have considered for those sales and have them come out and inspect and grade those horses accordingly. We've been doing it for 20 years plus with Fasig-Tipton for these select sales, and we send a handful of horses to those very select sales because you only want to have the best when you send them up to the July sale, which is the first yearling sale of the calendar, or up to Saratoga for that all-encompassing, all-important sale. And Joe, one thing I love about Fasig is that they don't sugarcoat things. So if they feel like that your horse is better placed in the Saratoga sale, they will tell you. If they feel like that, hey, this horse isn't going to make it in accordance with its competition up there, maybe you want to put it in different, they will actually tell you, you may want to put it in the September sale because that's a better place for it. They will give you an honest assessment. And really, as an owner breeder, that's all I want to know is where is this horse going to stack up in comparison to the other horses for that sale? So reach out to Fasig right now. Like, don't even waste a minute. Don't listen to the rest of the show for all I care.
Whoa.
Call Fasig-Tipton right now. Get Boyd on the phone. Get Anna on the phone and explain to them why they should consider your yearling for their select sales.
As I mentioned in the first segment, the headline of the weekend was me moving closer to first place in the Derby contest. But Emerging Market, the horse, also got 100 points toward the Kentucky Derby. Very game win in the Louisiana Derby. It's a tough ask for a horse with one start to go 1 mile and 3/16 and win a battle because Pavlovian was not backing down in that race. Looked like at the top of the stretch, Emerging Market was just going to open up. But Pavlovian, who won the Sunland Derby, shout out to Andrew Stewart, had everything he wanted and more in the stretch, that long stretch. You know, Chad is one of those trainers where he often, like with a lightly raced horse, does not feel pressed to go to the Derby. Like you think about it with like Cloud Computing and a couple others who he'll take a step back and be like, we'll look for the Preakness and then look to have like a big summer and fall campaign. But he said it's on the table with this horse. And I think that tells you how highly he thinks of Emerging Market and how highly, what a major contender he would be. But you're going in this race with 2 starts now, at least figure-wise, had a regression from 97 to 90 in that last race. I think it would be gutsy to run him in the Derby, but I think he's got all the talent in the world. It's just really just about whether or not he can work out the right trip. But I thought that was super impressive. John, I know you were glued to the Jeff Ruby Stakes on Saturday night at Turf Fight, so you can talk about that one.
Well, actually, even before we get into the Jeff Ruby, I do want to shout out to Pavlovian. Because, Joe, here's a horse that is a California bred, modestly bred son of Pavel. And all he's done is run 10 times, 2 wins, 4 seconds, and a third, almost held off Emerging Market. I mean, dug back in and really gave it a go. And, Joe, I have never seen this in the history of my 40-plus year career in the horse industry. Pavlovian has run in races ranging in distance from 4.5 furlongs to 9.5 furlongs. And at every single clip, he's run 10 starts at 9 different distances, Joe. 10 starts at 9 distances. You never see that before, ever. 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, 8 furlongs, 8.5, and now the 1 mile and 3/16 gauntlet of the Louisiana Derby. I mean, he is a horse that like has been running modest numbers, modest figures, but man, did he dig in and give Emerging Market everything that he wanted.
Well, Doug O'Neill is old school like that. So if you're a big foundation guy going into the Derby, he's like live long shot for sure. Because as John mentioned, 10 starts, got that dog in him, willing to fight. So yeah, I agree. Interesting, like in comparison to Emerging Market seasoning wise.
Absolutely. So we'll go from the positive of a Pavlovian, which again, I love the name too. You got to love the Pavlovian.
It's a good one.
To, for the love of God, man, why is the Jeff Ruby Stakes stake 100-point race? And I know you're going to say, well, John, Final Gambit, who won it last year, finished 4th in the Kentucky Derby last year. And Two Phils, who ran it a couple of years prior, ran a game 2nd in the Kentucky Derby. So maybe they should have. You know what, though? That's BS, because Two Phils actually ran most of his races before then and after then on the dirt. So, that was just interesting planning as far as getting him enough points in the Jeff Ruby Stakes stake, which name I hate also, for $777,000.
I was gonna say, don't you like the purse?
On top of it,
he's a marketer.
And you say, why does this race deserve to be the same point total as some of the other major preps in it? And maybe people just don't give a shit, and that's why it is. But to me, you have a race that's on the Tapeta, and I am all for having as many stake races on the Tapeta as possible, because that's where our industry is going, is safer racetracks, more opportunities to run on the all-weather racetracks and the Tapeta, courses. So maybe in a couple of years, I'll be on the other side of this argument saying, well, how come the Jeff Ruby stake isn't more than 100 points? It should be.
Some loudmouth on a podcast was railing about it for years.
Exactly. Thank God he's off the air. But that being said, Full Effort was a turf horse before he became a Tapeta horse. Finished 2nd in the 2 preps, to the Jeff Ruby stake, and probably, I'm assuming they will run him in the Kentucky Derby. And you know what, Joe? Just because I'm making a beef about it, no pun intended, although it's pretty funny, beef and the stakes, as it were. And he'll probably run well in the Derby because he has enough points to get in. But man, would I be pissed off as an owner to be on the outside looking in because a horse won on the Tapeta? Yeah, I'd be really pissed. But you'd also have to say to yourself, well, your horse didn't do enough to get enough points, so shame on you for that's bad management. But Joe, do you have any feeling whatsoever? And you won't hurt my feelings if you say I don't give a shit either way, because I'm not going to pick Full Effort, on my ticket for the Derby, nor am I going to pick them next week in the supplemental chart. Does that kind of race irk you, that it's 100-point Kentucky Derby race like some of the other ones that are going on in the last week and this week?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me really, because we got the automatic qualifier for the England from the UK. Like, that's not going to be a dirt race. So if there's going to be an automatic qualifier for another non-dirt race, who's to say we shouldn't have that for an American non-dirt race? And listen, were we going to pretend like there aren't several horses in the Derby every year that do not belong in there and are only in there because they have enough points? Like, it's not as if we're keeping Secretariat on the 21st AE, like, for the Derby. I get what you're saying, that like it doesn't match up history wise or results wise to some of these other 100-point preps, but because of its place on the calendar, I feel like it'd be awkward to be like, okay, everything else this weekend and next is a 100-point Derby prep. This one is 25. I get what you're saying, but I just think we like the system is so massaged to let other horses who probably don't belong in the race in, that I can't get worked up about one other race being that kind of qualifier.
But like last year, Baeza almost didn't get in because he didn't have enough points because he didn't run enough. I mean, he was a late developing horse. But
that was also because of the short fields at Santa Anita, which is a whole nother discussion. Like, that race was a decreased points race because there were only 4 horses in there or whatever. I mean, if he were ran in a full field, he would have gotten in.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying about these automatic points, automatic berths. Do I think that, it's good to have a worldwide race roster? Yeah, for the Breeders' Cup it is, but not necessarily for the Kentucky Derby. And look, 20 horses in a race is the most by far that we have, in any race. And it's not even close the next time that there's a full field and it gets to 12 or 14 horses. I mean, there's a big gap. So if you're not one of the top 18 in this case, because the 2 automatic qualifiers, then shame on you. But yeah, it bothers me that you're giving, a horse that maybe isn't as deserved as others, an automatic berth in the starting gate because he won on the Tapeta in March.
That's fine. I respect your grudge holding. That's like,
it's not quite a bee in my bonnet.
All right.
It is a chip on my shoulder, though. If we can get that,
we do I feel like you're spiritually Italian in that way. Like it's one of the things that we have in common is the grudge holding.
Yeah.
So I respect it.
The Jews and the Italians are basically two sides of the same coin.
Simpatico.
As far as I'm concerned,
Totally.
We hold grudges. We love our food and we love our nanas. Yeah. But
very culturally similar now that you mention it. All right. One other thing I wanted to touch on before.
Wow, did that take a weird turn?
We are a uniting show. All the Jews, Italians, Argentinians, Mexicans. We bring everybody to the table, and that's why I think people love us so much. Don't you? You love us, guys. Let's talk real quick about the undercard races for this weekend, because selfishly, West Point has a couple of entrants that we're very, very excited and interested about. Counting Stars runs in the Fantasy on Friday. I'm going to be there at Oaklawn, and it's we were there, like as John mentioned, in the Open last year for the Arkansas Derby. Thankfully, I'm there Friday. I can get out of town before the Arkansas Derby because some of these big racing days where it's like 80,000 people, it's just like it's too much for me. But $1 million race on Friday. She gets a rematch with Explora. Search Party's in there as well for Mark Cassidy is a nice Brad Cox horse, sticker shock. So not a ton of quantity, but good quality in the race. Hopefully nobody scratches because 6 is the threshold for full Oaks points. Gets decreased to 75% if there's 5 horses and 50% if there's 4 horses. Everybody stay in the race. Please, everybody stay in the race because we need to run 1, 2, 3 to get to the Oaks. I think if somebody scratches, it'll have to be 1, 2, but we're very excited. She is such an oddball horse. You've heard us talk about her. When she's on her game, she's as good as any 3-year-old filly in the country. But there's sometimes she just doesn't feel like showing up to work, even though she's trained well, she's healthy. So fingers crossed she has her running shoes on Friday, and we can punch our ticket to the first Friday in May because I love that filly so much. One of my favorite horses in the entire stable. And John, this doesn't have to be a West Point commercial because you can talk about any other undercard races you like, but our buddy Carson's Run is back in the Appleton Stakes on Saturday at Gulfstream. Carson's Run, as you'll remember, named after the son of West Point partner Wade Yost Carson, who has Wolf Hirschhorn syndrome, which is the same syndrome that Cody Dorman of Cody's Wish fame had. And it was really cool. They got to meet each other before the 2023 Breeders' Cup. Now, Carson's Run, the horse had a kind of a nothing campaign last year. He ran second in the Fort Marcy, didn't run a step in the Manhattan. And just to take you behind the curtain a little bit, we were trying to figure out what was going on with him for months. And shout out to Miguel Clement and the Clement team. They tried all sorts of things, like his feet were stinging him. They switched shoes. They did all sorts of therapy sessions with him. And it just, nothing worked out. And he never got back to the horse that we knew until like late fall. He started to look like the old Carson's Run. He started being a jerk, which is like definitely par for the course for him when he's feeling good. Started training better, put on more muscle. And now he's back in the Appleton, a little bit short for him, but it's just one of those scenarios, John, where it's like he owes us nothing. Right. Like he had that tremendous 2-year-old, 3-year-old campaign. He won the summer as a 2-year-old. He won the Saratoga Derby as a 3-year-old, earned over $1.25 million on the track in 2024 alone. So he owes us nothing. And we were ready to pull the plug if he just had not come back around. He's going to get one more shot. We're going to try to bring him back for a 5-year-old campaign. Very, very near and dear horse to us and a lot of other people. And he's been training awesome. I do think a mile is a little short for him. This is more of a prep for the Fort Marcy and then eventually the Manhattan. But very excited to have him back. But most importantly, excited to have him back and going the right way.
Yeah, and it's great when you do get horses that maybe for whatever reason, usually it's mental at this stage of the game, that just don't want to give it their 100% anymore, and that's their prerogative when you have a horse that has done as well as Carson's Run has done. We're running into the same situation with Hades right now, where he won at Tampa. He ran a couple of subpar races, and he's just showing us that like he doesn't want to do it anymore. So we're actually, I think, I'll break news here. We're going to retire him and give him a long outstanding career out in a field. We're working with a couple of nonprofits right now because sometimes the light just doesn't go back on. That they're not interested in, and they're protecting themselves. They're not running hard, and they just don't feel like doing it for whatever reason. So at that point, the horses are talking to you, and if you can't figure out how to get them excited and interested in running anymore, then they shouldn't run. And I'm glad that you guys were able to find the whole card with Carson's Run, and hopefully have another fun campaign with them. Joe, you mentioned the $1 million fantasy at Oaklawn, and where Mark Cassidy has half of the field. And we opted not to run French Friction in that race because we were seeing you're reading the tea leaves and see just how hard of a race that was going to be between Search Party and Counting Stars, Sticker Shock, and of course Explorer coming in. But Joe, I'm not wishing this on her yet, but when Counting Stars is getting ready to retire, I think it would be a great idea if you guys bred her to Fierceness, who I think is her male counterpart as far as the girl with the curl. Like when Fierceness was on, there was nobody that was beating Fierceness. But when Fierceness was like, meh, I'm not feeling like running. So that foal, that projected foal, I think, is going to be like the Breeders' Cup, juvenile champion, and then barely beat the ambulance in the Derby, that kind of a horse, because it's just going to be, the so much talent in the world, and whether or not they just feel like running. But that's kind of what Counting Stars reminds me of, where, the 3 races that she won very impressively, by open lengths. And the 2 races that she put in clunkers, she put in real, clunkers. I mean, she did that's why the Honeybee, I know we talked about it last show, when we were talking about the Honeybee, that's why it was so much fun to watch her run down the lane the way she did, passing horses and having fun. And after the race was over, you could see she was on her toes. She was like, yeah, that was fun. Okay, I want to do that again. So hopefully that'll be the case for you and the rest of the West Point team at the Fantasy in Arkansas. The only other race I want to talk about a little bit, Joe, is the Gulfstream Park Oaks, where I think a lot of talent, went to Oaklawn, and I think there's a lot of talented 3-year-old fillies, I think, that are waiting for the Ashland, because I didn't think that in comparison to the previous years that this year's Gulfstream Park Oaks was a grade 2 type race. I don't think it's a grade 2 type field in there. You have She Be Smooth, who won very impressively in the Devona Dale. Obviously, I think she'll be the favorite in there. But, then you have horses that took 5 starts to break their maiden, a filly that won for maiden 35, Just Singing, who I think is a legitimate filly coming in from the fairgrounds, and then Prom Queen, who, as the races get longer, she should definitely relish in that. Maybe not the 1/16 of the Gulfstream Park Oaks, but certainly of the Kentucky Oaks, if she gets to that point. But I was a little disappointed with that card, with that race. And quite frankly, there were some other races on the card that I was like, oh, the Pan American's coming, the 1.5-mile race. I love that race. It's kind of like there's a couple of good horses and then a couple of other ones that I think are just getting the free lunch out of it. Overall, I wasn't that crazy about this card as I have been about previous cards that Gulfstream has offered this winter.
Yeah, I will say that the Fountain of Youth card was incredible. And I do think that this is just one of those things where it's like you had such a stacked card for that. Not everybody's going to come back in 4 weeks for the next, iteration in the respective divisions. But I do think the Gulfstream Park Oaks is interesting because of She Be Smooth. Like, she was so dominant in that race in the Devona Dale. Now, she did get a great setup. Yeah. It was a fast pace, and she kind of just ran by some tiring horses, but she did win by 6, 1 off. Now she gets to go 2 turns. And how about Lexitonian? I've seen some runners from Lexitonian who was not like a fashionable stallion going to Calumet at the end of his racing career, but I thought it was a pretty hardy horse for Jack Sisterson, shipped all over, ran some big races. I feel like he came back and won like the Bing Crosby in like a short amount of time after running big and on the East Coast. So I do think that's a stallion to kind of take a look at as someone who's bubbling up and whose horses are probably under the radar, but not for long. So that horse is interesting. Prom Queen had the blowout maiden win. She gets a little bit of a class test here, but I'm interested in the filly races, John, because we're just waiting for that filly to step forward and be like, hey, I'm the top dog here, and everybody else has got to step up to beat me. We just haven't had it yet. We've had some nice horses like Explorer and Counting Stars got decent figures, and the Honeybee, She Be Smooth, as I'm mentioning, Zany I think of as well. So there's some good 3-year-old fillies, but time's running out. Like, we got two more weekends to try to figure out who is going to potentially be the Oaks favorite, because I know like the Derby is going to have 8 or 10 horses that you probably think are going to win, but the Oaks is so far, it seems like a scramble, and I'm hoping we'll get a little bit more clarity for the home team, of course, this weekend, but just in general in the 3-year-old filly division. So yeah, excellent weekend of racing. excited to be at Oaklawn, one of the places that, where racing really feels like it's booming. And there's like not as many places like that as you wish there would be. And Oaklawn is that. Shout out to the Sella family who does an incredible job. And it's an excellent facility, top class. And the racing has obviously been tremendous with full fields and big purse money. So I do like going to places like that where it seems like, especially in comparison to some of the other tracks, trying not to pay their fees, and treating racing like it's an afterthought most of the year. It's great to go somewhere where it's like, hey, this is the game in town, and we're going to treat it as such. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 127 of Rail Talk. Service announcement. We are 100 subscribers away from 30,000 on YouTube. So if you haven't done it yet, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a pet, tell whoever you can to hit that subscriber button, get us above 30,000. And then you'll see my man Sai come out next week, because that's the tradition now that he comes out to celebrate all of our milestones, of which there are many. Major thanks to our production staff. Producer Patty Wolf, we love you. We appreciate you. Hope you're feeling better. And our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. You guys are the best. And y'all are the best for tuning in. Wish us luck this weekend down at Oaklawn. And we will see you next. Oh, wait, I forgot to thank John. John, thank you as always, my friend. I love you, brother.
Love you.
I would never, ever go through a whole show without mentioning you. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.